As a lighting TD, you need to know a lot about how renderers work, how to prepare a scene so that it will render efficiently and effectively, how to get things looking right, how to fix artifacts. And so we spend about half our time doing development and half our time solving problems that come up day to day, like what we call support work.
Like tickets, basically.
Tickets, yeah. So working closely with the artists. So we're like at the intersection point between the production artists and the dolphins developing all the technology.
You are listening to the 21 Artist Show, a podcast that inspires creatives to make meaningful content to pursue their passions. I'm talking with creators, artists, and engineers about their careers, lessons they have learned, and how to make an impact. I'm your host, Alexander Richter. I'm a technical director and coach in visual effects, animation, and games. For more content, go to 21artistshow.com. Enjoy the show.
Hey guys, welcome back. We are on our second episode at Animal Logic here in Sydney. And today we have Steve Agland here with me, who is a supervising lighting TD. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And today what we want to talk about is to define the role of a lighting rendering TD even more. Obviously look a little bit also into the supervising element of that, and also look a little bit into how this evolves and plays out in a company like Animal Logic and projects that they worked on. Basically, my first question to you would be, how did you become a lighting rendering technical director, especially in a company like Animal Logic?
Well, I grew up in Sydney, which is where Animal Logic is.
It's always helpful.
I hadn't really considered while I was at school that I'd work in the movies, but I always loved movies. But my dreams were to do something with computers. I had that intersection of interests. As a teenager, I remember buying some books that came with, programs on a little disc at the back with 3D applications and virtual reality, very primitive sort of game engines and things like that. And one of them had a sort of shareware ray tracer on it. And I sort of taught myself to write scenes in a text editor and render them through this ray tracer called PolyRay, I think it was. So I was playing around with 3D software as a kid, as a teenager, and got myself into a computer science degree at UTS here in Sydney, and they had a pretty good graphics program there where you got to write your own ray tracer, and they also had an animation course where you worked in Houdini to sort of make your own little short animation. The uni had a bit of a relationship with Animal Logic because Animal Logic was one of the sort of graphics employers in Sydney. So eventually, after working in the sort of web development industry for a few years, I plucked up the courage to apply here when they were hiring for Happy Feet, and on the strength of the sort of animation I'd made at uni on my show reel, got a job as a shader writer basically on Happy Feet. So spent 3 years working on Happy Feet doing snow, ice, subsurface scattering, effects, procedurals for RenderMan, and eventually got into the lighting department, which I found I always had a particular interest in. I was working in look development assets, but I was always looking over at lighting thinking, oh, that looks so cool, finishing the shots.
Yeah, not just having the assets basically.
Yeah. And eventually towards the end when they needed lighters, got in and started lighting shots, lit a few shots on Happy Feet, and then stayed around after that. And because I had the shader development and the programming experience, ended up being a TD in lighting, and went on to sort of be the lead lighting TD on shows like Legend of the Guardians. Eventually became the facility supervising lighting TD on all the shows here at Animal Logic. And I've been the supervising lighting TD for about 10 years now, I think, since about the Lego movie.
One of the things that I found also very interesting when I talked to Nick before you, and he was also 20 years basically here in the company, same thing around the same time as you are.
I'm one of those people who came and then never left. So it's my first job in the industry, but I had my 20th
so
anniversary.
It's very interesting. And I mean, also obviously, as he described it in the beginning, the hiring process was obviously more local in the beginning. Now it's, he said like 50% is now outside or non-Australians basically, which is like obviously changed. So sometimes the right moment, right place is important. And like now obviously globalization opens up and everything becomes at the same time a little bit more blurry in terms of, you know, position. So for example, I remember at Framestore in the film department, every lighter was a lighting TD.
Yes, that can be
very
confusing when we're hiring. At Animal Logic, a TD doesn't do shots, doesn't produce assets. We write code, we support things, we get things working, but we call artists the people who actually light the shots or build the assets.
I mean, that's also my definition always, is like the artist produces the final product. So everything the artist does will end up on the screen. And if the games will be in the game, while everything like a TD generally does is support the creation of the product, you know? So at the end of the day, so how would you define a lighting technical director where you say like, there's no question about it?
So this is the Animal Logic definition.
Yes.
And I respect that, you know, at other studios, a lighting TD can mean someone who lights shots, and they might be quite technical.
Sure.
Yeah, they have different expectations. But my team in particular is kind of like a software development team. We spend a lot of our time, we have our own lighting app that we've developed in-house. So I need kind of application developers. We write this in Qt. We build this app. We work very closely with the rendering team in the R&D department who develop our in-house renderer. And so you need to, as a lighting TD, you need to know a lot about how renderers work, how to prepare a scene so that it will render efficiently and effectively, how to get things looking right, how to fix artifacts. And so we spend about half our time doing development and half our time solving problems that come up day to day, like what we call support work.
Like tickets, basically.
Tickets, yeah. So working closely with the artists. So we're like at the intersection point between the production artists and the dolphins developing all the technology.
How would you combine or separate the job of a lighting TD compared to a rendering TD?
Well, you mean, a rendering developer?
There is a position of rendering TD, or sometimes it's / lighting / rendering TD. So I just want to figure out.
We've sometimes had lighting rendering TDs, and they've been, I guess, more focused on the support side of things, but we haven't had that position for a while. Because
there's also obviously render wranglers, which are more of like the organizational farm stuff. Yeah,
so here they're separate, they're in a whole different branch of the hierarchy, like part of IT, but handling all the resources, the farm resources and making sure, you know, things aren't running out of memory and that the right jobs are getting finished in the right order. But we work closely with them as well, because often if things break, we're the ones who have to figure out why it broke.
For you, it's more like a rendering developer?
There's another branch, which is like the R&D division.
Yes.
And they have a really impressive team here at Animal Logic called the rendering team. And they actually we've got our in-house renderer called Glimpse. And as well as that, they develop sort of other related tools to sort of very efficiently rendering things, including viewport stuff now.
But I mean, the difference between the two is like one is developing an efficient renderer and the other one is tweaking the renderer to render efficiently for the shot.
Here, at least, the rendering team will develop the renderer. They're very C++. Performance, thinking about instruction sets and, you know, getting ray tracing, intersecting with curves, all that sort of thing. Whereas we're more like building the user-facing tools. So we're about Windows and graph editors and gluing all these different bits of technology together to make a workflow that's efficient and pleasant for the lighting artists. So we work with the lighting artists and find out, you know, where the bottlenecks are in their workflow, where the pain points are, and try and design tools that they can use to get their jobs done faster. And that often involves talking to the rendering team, the guys who write the renderer, to get new features added or make something more efficient or allow, this hack that the artists are doing to make it more legitimate and properly supported, that sort of thing.
It's also like something that I always describe is a technical director is the bridge between the artist and the developer.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's actually
exactly
literally
like
the difference. But obviously, like in terms of, there's this renderer, it doesn't have to be in-house, but then you have to create the bridge between like, oh, it's so complicated to do this and this thing. I create you a Python tool probably.
Yeah, lots of Python. My team is all Python oriented as opposed to C++.
Qt and so on.
Yeah, lots of Qt and like I said, gluing things together. So writing scripts to automate things, and also the whole pipeline aspect of it. So making sure the data comes into the lighting artists and is just ready for them to use, and that when they need to send it on, it's just, ideally just click a button and off it goes to the render farm and things get rendered automatically, comped automatically. Yeah,
like one of the things that I do is always to teach people how to become technical director. And the question that I get asked is specifically for the roles that are kind of more artistic. I mean, for example, rigging is such a technical, while lighting TD, it's always like, how much lighting do I do? What should I do? As you described, not much.
It depends.
Animal logic, at least.
Yeah.
But the question here, for example, is what are the kind of requirements that you see someone come into the role? Like, is that something that a student can become, like someone 100% freshly out of university comes to you? It was a visual effects university, best case, and then it's like, okay, I want to apply for a lighting TD job. Is that possible? And what are the requirements that you see for that?
Sometimes. So if I need to fill a senior role, if I need someone senior, I might look for someone who's actually had experience working on similar films, doing this kind of job before. Sometimes we've got more than one position open and we can take on a junior. Mm-hmm. And then I'd look for someone who has a sort of focus and passion on the sort of rendering end of the pipeline. Maybe they've written their own renderer, which is a sort of common thing to do if you study sort of graphics at university, or worked out on game engines. Just understand things about, rays, pixels, polygons, that sort of thing. But also if you have experience writing things in Python, Python is the language of our industry.
You heard it.
Yep. For now. Okay. And that's not going to change anytime soon.
Not very soon, at least.
If you're a C++ person, there are roles here, but not so much in my team. If you've worked on projects, either yourself or with a team that involves producing animation or visual effects, so that's involved Maya or Houdini, Katana, Blender, those sort of industry standard things. If you've worked with those and had to like build little tools or scripts for them, that's kind of what I want to hear.
The question is always like, I feel like compared, for example, lighting is very easy to show. It's much harder to show lighting TD work. Obviously, you can show tools.
Yep.
But knowledge of a rendering engine, for example, I know everything about RenderMan or whatever, is such a hard way to present, I feel like. So how would you independently, obviously you can show some scripts, in Python especially, like you can show how something happens in Maya, you press a button, lights will set up or change settings, whatever. But how do you like test or question for RenderMan qualification, Arnold qualification or whatever?
Well, I mean, when it comes to coding, a common thing now is to share like your GitHub account, and we'll have a look at that. Often I just want to hear you in an interview talk about the sort of projects you've worked on, and from like, tell me about the challenges you had and the problems you had to solve. And from that, I can usually get a good idea how well you understand the technology, the concepts. When it comes to maybe software engineering, do you know object-oriented programming? Have you used the Maya API, for example? Have you worked on a project where you had to render it in Arnold or RenderMan or Cycles or something like that? And, what sort of issues did you have? I often ask that question, like, what were the challenges? What sort of problems did you have that you had to solve? Because usually from the way you answer that question, I can sort of tell how deep you got into it. And also what your attitude towards it, all it is. Is it like, I can sort of tell if you care about that sort of thing, if you get excited by those sort of problems, or if you wish you were doing something else.
Okay.
And yeah, I want to see that sort of positive, optimistic, can-do attitude, if you know what I mean.
Is it better than also to apply if someone is like super like, I'm an expert Maya Arnold and that's it? Or is it better if someone's like, oh, I touched everything under the sun, Houdini, Arnold, Maya, Mantra, and obviously it's a very generic question.
It's nice to hear that, but I mean, if you're a student, you don't have much time to do all that.
Is like someone is like only like in one software, which is maybe a little bit unflexible for us?
Well, I mean, here we're a bit unusual in that we don't use, in my team, we don't use Maya. We've got our in-house renderer. So no one, if you haven't worked here before, you haven't used our tools.
Yes.
The main thing that we, like external piece of tech that we're heavily invested in is USD. The whole Animal Logic pipeline is built around USD now. And our lighting tool that we built is sort of based on everything is USD. The scene that comes in, the file format that we build our graphs in is kind of like Katana, but is written in USD, like encoded in USD. That it's rare to find someone who's had a lot of experience with USD. It's still pretty new, and I don't know if it's worked its way into curriculums.
I think it works its way in the curriculums as it works its way in most companies. It's like people talk about it. People say it will be next month integrated, and then a few years later it's still in the...
Usually I'm happy if someone is just knows the basics, if they've read the first page of the docs or something like that.
Okay.
Because not many people have had a chance to work deeply with it. And we've all had to learn on the fly.
It's not like the hardest thing to do your own small mini project as a preparation or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, at least now when it's working, because when I was trying to use it for research, I think like 5 years ago or something like that, it was horribly broken.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it's like now if you're out there.
I think it's okay-ish, I heard.
We published a big scene in USD that you can download, which has lots of assets and textures and things in it, as something for people to test their USD-based software with, and as just a playground in if you're trying to learn it.
Yeah, just recently talked with Paul Kenyak. He came back for our first season, and we talked about like research, and one of the topics was USD actually, and we also talked about like the progress from unusable open source to seems to be okay now, but it's still it's again, I feel like even like looking at where I worked before, it always was on the table and not really ending up working, but everyone like wanted to integrate it, but it's to some degree it's a heavy lift if you and you have to change so much.
It's a big investment.
Yes, so I think especially if you are like under 100 people or something like that, could be a little bit painful to. It's
still pretty early, I'd say, in the USD era. There's still big changes that they're proposing and talking about. If you follow the mailing list, it's not settled yet. But Animal Logic decided, like, we were ready for a new pipeline about 4 or 5 years ago, and we decided, okay, we're going to go all in on this, and everyone, invested in it, each department, including in lighting. And that helped. It helped having lots of expertise in the building because everyone had to learn it.
That's also one of my favorite things when I started to study at the Film Academy, and I think that is my favorite thing in this industry in general. Especially if you work with exceptional people, is like everyone is like a teacher around you. You can just stand up. You have a big problem with this specific portion of the software or whatever. Someone in the building is maybe writing a book about that thing or something like that. That's actually always awesome. How much is lighting part of the understanding and curriculum of a lighting TD? Like, how much would you expect someone have an eye for lighting, or is it more about having an eye for fireflies and I think over the years it's gotten a bit less to do with needing to know the craft yourself and more about more 3-point light or something like that.
Yeah, it's more just knowing the technology, like USD or renderers and things like that. So if you've never lit a shop before, that's not necessarily a problem to join my team. You have to have a curiosity for it and an interest in it, because you spend all day working with the artists who are doing that, and you have to understand why they're trying to do things, like why a certain look is not desirable, or why a director might be asking for something that is physically incorrect and you have to find a way to cheat it. That happens a lot. To be a lighting TD here, you don't need to be an artist, but it doesn't hurt. And I used to be one, quite a few of us used to have dabbled in that.
One of the reasons why I'm asking about that is because I think a lot of people don't focus enough on things, especially, I think nowadays more than before, the passion for something comes more with the result than with the process. Before that, you were dabbling on 3D, and then by accident you found that this is actually a job, and then you applied and became this. While nowadays it's like, oh, I would like to work on a Lego movie, I would like to work at Pixar, I would like to become this. So it's a little bit more forward-thinking, product thinking than this transforming your passion into something. And I feel like you can do that. It's fine, especially if you found out it's really what you enjoy. But I see also a lot of people kind of try to have their secondary and tertiary skills showing and kind of that. And so if they would, for example, apply for a lighting TD role, they were like, okay, I have to become a lighter, and I have to do this, and I have to understand that. And same thing is rigging. Oh, I have to also be a modeler, and I have to, and it's like, yeah, but it's good if you know that. But the main focus at the end of the day is understanding the role and then covering all the bases of your day-to-day, which in this case, at Animal Logic, has nothing to do with lighting. You don't sit there and
yeah,
should I a hair light there too? It's like no one will ask you that.
Yeah, that's one of the the compromise of working somewhere at a big company is that it's quite specialized. The roles are quite specialized, so it's not a generalist role. You've got your responsibility is here, at least it's lighting, and also we cover anywhere else rendering happens. So our pipeline is based around the idea of whenever any artist does some work, they check that into the asset system, and then an automatic render gets kicked off, and then that render is reviewed in a review session, and that's how the animation or the character effects or the surfacing is evaluated, and then it's that review which is delivered, which is quite a nice way to sort of arrange a pipeline. But it does mean that there's lots of renders happening that have got nothing to do with lighting, and if they're not going right, that's our sort of secondary responsibility as lighting TDs, is to support that, review render-based pipeline.
How would you describe a typical day, week in a lighting TD role here? What is the common task? We talked about typical tickets, but with some examples, maybe what kind of challenges there, because I think that helps a little bit to pick out. Okay, yeah, what skill do I have to have for that, basically? It's
always been a bit of a hybrid role. It's partially software engineer and partially a firefighter on the floor as things break. And you have to be able to handle both of those responsibilities. Some people are not suited to both, or they have a preference. That's fine, but in this role, you have to be able to do both. So a typical day would be you would have, we use Jira to sort of manage all our tasks, and you would have a variety of tasks currently open. Some would be developing a new feature for our lighting app, or it might be, upgrading the pipeline in some way. So that's your sort of base work. But then on the other hand, you might have some support tickets, like a shot is, the renders are flickering.
It's like the triage, basically.
Yeah. Or this shot is running out of memory, or I can't open the scene, or it's really slow. Can someone have a look? Or the eye pings are in the wrong place. And as they come in, we sort of triage them, and I'm often assigning them to people who don't look too busy. And you have to use your initiative, your judgment to decide when to put down this and pick up that. And so there's a bit of time management going on there. So you might spend the morning fixing that eye ping problem, have an idea for it, send off the idea to the artist. While you're waiting for their response, you get back to your implementing this cool new menu fit item that automates some process that people are currently having to do 5 clicks for when really it could be 1 click, for example. We have sort of higher level initiatives where we try and plan in advance, like 6 months, we're gonna roll out this big new feature. One big thing we did is our app used to be embedded in Maya, and eventually we sort of extracted it from Maya so it's standalone, and that required getting its own viewport implemented and working and all hooked up to all the other views. So we have sort of large scale initiatives like that as well that we're slowly working through.
So it's basically like you have like 3 levels of work in that, like very like triage day to day.
Yeah.
Maybe short to mid-term tools that will, you kind of develop like in the next few days and weeks. And then maybe something like, at the end of the year, that would be cool if we had this bigger thing, it's like 3 layers of potential work that you do.
There's development work and there's support work, and the development work might be a little standalone thing, or it might be part of a larger epic thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hopefully you get a variety of experiences there. You get to interact with, on the floor as the movies are being made, actually get shots out. And on the other hand, you get to sort of indulge your software engineering, trying to build an elegant experience for artists that's going to be used on multiple projects. So all our tools are, as much as possible, sort of facility level, in the sense that we're not building this lighting app for Lego. We're building it as something that'll work on the next project that comes in the door as well. We try to have all the shows running on the same tools.
The next level after lighting technical director, lead lighting technical director, or is already supervising lighting technical?
Yeah, we sort of have leads as well. At the moment, they're it's a show-based role. So we're a facility team, so we're not hired onto a particular show. The shows come and go, and we're across site. So there's half of us in Vancouver, half of us in Sydney. But we have to support actual movies, and so one thing we do is we might assign someone, say you're the lead TD for this, lighting TD for this show. So while that show is on, you're responsible for sort of staying in touch with the CG supervisors on that show and the lighting supervisor on that show. You're the point person, making sure that whatever problems are arising on that show are getting addressed by our team, and triaging the support tickets that come in. So that's kind of the next sort of higher level specialization you can have on our team. And then I'm sort of leading the team. We have about 10 people in the team at the moment, maybe 9.
In the lighting TD?
In the lighting TD team.
Oh, it's quite small.
Yeah, it's about 5 in each.
Oh, okay.
There are...
Because that's also, I think, that sometimes the scale is very hard to judge. Like how many people do you have on the, how many lighting TDs do you have? How many pipeline TDs do you have? And I think that is sometimes like, you either over or underestimate, you think like they have like 100 people lighting TD team or something like that.
Well, there's dozens of artists but they're working on the shows, and then there's the rendering team who actually write the renderer. They're a similar size, maybe. But
they're
smaller.
kind of
they're in the R&D department
to some degree.
Yeah, although they're like our best friends. We're talking to them every day. And then there are other TD departments. There's the assets department who look after sort of look dev and modeling, rigging, and then there's the performance TDs which look after layout, animation, imaging, which is comp and anything to do with images coming in and out of the building, and color science, that sort of thing. And then there's some effects TDs and things like that.
Yeah, I always say like it's kind of a good rule of thumb to have like 1 TD per like 6 to 10 people kind of to support.
Per artist.
Yeah, per artist, like 6 to 10 artists kind of thing. So you have a little bit of, and that's also the responsibility. I think that is something that I always want to teach, that like you're supporting other people, and it's not one person, it's a group of people. And so there is also the responsibility of everything you do can help them a lot, but also can hurt them a lot. If you like make a mistake in your tool and then suddenly everything breaks or saves in the wrong direction way or the wrong attributes, that can hurt. But obviously if you do a good job, it's such like, they save maybe 10% a day on publishing time or whatever, and suddenly it's such a free up time. So that also makes these people much more valuable, but also because they have to have this bridge between the technology and artistic. Because just because you are a good programmer, and I think that same thing you mentioned is you still have to understand the communication of the other person, their needs. And that is something I really learned, is a lot of artists have a hard time to communicate their ideas in technical matters. Like, it's like they want a specific tool and they think this is what I have to communicate. And then you write it. If you would write the tool, and I saw that a few times, like developers who write the tool, like literally like a checklist. And it becomes like, what is that? I cannot use that. It's like completely unusable because they couldn't, like, bring their process into clear instructions, which a developer often searches for. Is like they need to bring it down to that. And I think with a TD, it's always this questioning actually, and it's like, oh, do you really want that? Because if you do that, you will have this. Is that what you want? If yes, sure, but is that what you want? And I think that comes back to avoiding, creating unusable tools that are maybe more complex than helpful, where you have to type in everything, where it's like, basically. And so I think that is where I see a lot of the communication aspect of TDs come in also as an important part, because you are, like, let's say 1 TD per 5 to 10 artists or something like that. So you supporting that many people basically, and one of them has a problem, they come more or less to you or to the group, but at the end of the day, it ends up being, separated into. How does that, like, for you changed becoming in a supervising role from before being more hands-on, writing tools, basically talking about direct things that influences the day-to-day, to now more of a organizational management?
Well, I still talk about the day-to-day things, but it's mainly just talking now, not actually doing it myself. Okay. Yeah.
I saw there was like 20 tickets still open. That's unacceptable.
Yeah, I have to, like, a lot of it is still trying to get a sense of what, you were saying communication is important and understanding the artist. And that's very important, is to be able to talk to the artist and understand what they're really trying to do. You can't just blindly, as you say, implement what they've asked for. Usually any significant request will get talked over with the team and the lighting supervisors, and can we generalize this solution, and is it really what we want to do? Is it just should we just do a temporary hack or something like that? So those sort of conversations I'm sort of in all the time. I have to spend a lot of time sort of planning ahead, working out how we're going to allocate our resources, maintaining lists of all the things that people have asked for, and making sure we don't lose track of the things that we're planning to do, working out how we're going to use our time. We sort of do quarterly planning now. So how are we, we've got this many days roughly to work on these sort of items. Which ones are we going to do first? Which shows are coming up that are going to want this? Which problems were causing the most pain on the last show, and shuffling things around like that.
Do you miss that a little bit more, of the hands-on situation?
I do. So I'm still trying to work out how to keep some of that. Yeah, that is the main risk of becoming a manager, is that you miss the hands-on problem solving. And yeah, I miss thinking about rays and pixels, and
I mean, you also have this instant, to some degree, gratification, because you can see results, like, either unfold in front of you, because if you fix a problem, there's like, it works. Where in the management role, it's often a very long investment that you do. You see over time, for example, maybe your goal is to have, I don't know, less overtime for your team, or less tickets in the triage every day. So it takes, you implement something, and it takes a few days, weeks, or months to, see the results. I think that is the biggest difference to the hands-on, on the ground situation, to the more management role, where you have to wait longer, bigger strategies, basically, bigger thinking.
The work you do can helps make an artist's life easier. That's what it all comes down to for us, and something you have to sometimes remind people of. What it all comes down to is, it's the artists we're building these tools for, and if we can make their life easier, that will make the movie better. Because if their life's easier, it means things are working well, smoothly. They're making their creative decisions and seeing the results of that quickly and getting the results they expect. They're not having to do overtime, ideally. That's like, as I say, the biggest failure is if they're doing overtime because the tools aren't up to scratch. That's when I really start to stress. Doesn't happen that much now, but that's the North Star basically, is happy artists. And so if we can tweak something so that, they are slightly a bit more relaxed today than they were yesterday, that's the win. That's what it's all about.
I think that's also describes the job the most. And I think that's something that people have to understand. Some of them definitely is like a TD role is not like a superstar role. It's not like, you're not a supervisor, you're not the big artist, floating around. Your supportive element is some people sometimes mix up TD and IT, but in some degree it is this element of support. IT also, they don't per se produce anything. But if the server are slow as hell, no one can produce anything basically. Yeah. And so I think that is also there's this ego part where you cannot have as it's like, even if you write your tool, it doesn't I think that's probably the most common thing is like you write a tool and you become a little bit more self-centered. Like you want to write the best tool, the best whatever UI interface or whatever. And then you kind of miss the point of like, what is it for and who is it for?
Yes.
And the person has to work with it, not your, Photoshop UI design and your whatever hardcore, deep level, nested, capsulated code that is then like unrecognizable, basically.
You have to get satisfaction out of your job as well as a TD. So I find, I know what you mean. It's tempting. Sometimes you get a great idea and you're like, I want to see this idea realized. And that's fine.
I would have to have multi-threading on that, and it's like, who cares?
It has to align with, the actual reason you're here, which is to get, in my case, get the lighting and rendering of the film done efficiently and beautifully, right?
Yeah.
So it's still good to have those projects that really inspire you and excite you, and you want to get to the end of it and see this new piece of innovation that you've had the idea for on the floor. The trick is just to make sure you come up with ideas where the result of that coincides with what the films need, what the artists need. And that's something I've learned over time is when I'm trying to, because I get a lot of satisfaction out of, trying to find problems and coming up with ingenious ideas that, no one has done before, and it's going to save all these hours, or it's going to get this new look. But it's no good if no one's going to end up using it, or if it's only going to, save one person a few minutes once per movie. The trick is the added work you have to do is finding the right projects to get excited about.
Find the efficient way on the right, find the cool project for yourself that also benefits strongly the project and the artist, basically.
Yeah, sometimes a problem comes up and I'm like, oh, this is frustrating. I wish we didn't have to worry about this, but we have to solve it somehow. And then I think about it and eventually, and talk about it with other people. And eventually we start to see a way we can do this, and you can kind of, wait a minute, this could be kind of elegant if we do this, and it could fit into this other system nicely. And then when you realize you've got an idea that's going to be fun and satisfying to implement, but it's also going to be productive, that's the best. That's when you're like, we can all work together on this. It's going to be exciting.
I think that's also, an good part, an important part of teams, because I worked in teams before where I ended up being purely triage. It was extremely boring and undersatisfying, basically. And it's like literally just, plugging holes every day. And you cannot even fix the holes because it's always like, the holes were so big that the triage take the whole 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day. And that was like such a horrible experience for me personally, like pipeline direction, but it can be lighting, whatever. And so I think that is why it's also so important to have this mid to long-term projects that go more into, that's a little bit more into your personal interest project, where you can say something like, I don't know, we would like to maybe someone in the team is super interested in some database or some new PySite UI Qt something, and there's like, oh, I can create a UI template that we can use for every future thing. And it's like, yeah, sure, then let's find a way, if there is like, if we see the benefit, and let's make it a small, big project and develop that over time. And I think that is also the way of like spiking up the interest, because there's only so much you can find enjoyment from daily triage.
Yeah.
It's very boring. It's nice to see like, unblocking people, helping people, having this communication. I really love it actually. To have this, like someone has a problem, you could talk with them. It's very nice. I love it to talk with people in general. Like, it's a big part of TD work for me. But if you just do that every day and you have no chance to learn something new, because you don't, if you do that, to experience something new besides the typical, why is it crashing or whatever. For me personally, I cannot do that for a longer period of time. It just becomes unsettling.
I think most people are like that, especially when you hire people for their software engineering skills.
Yes.
They want to use that. So a lot of my job is trying to make sure that I'm getting that balance right with everyone, and that they're not too overwhelmed with support work, that I'm spreading the support work around. There's times like right now when we're towards the end of a project where the lighting has to deliver 100 shots a week or something like that. Anything that goes wrong is really urgent. And so the support load is quite high. And I'm hoping I can sort of reward the people who are really grappling with that at the moment, with some nice meaty development work to do when things quiet down again. So things go, you have these times throughout the year where a lot of support work and then a lot of development work, and hope to find that balance. And the other balance is that the issue you mentioned before of it's good to have people specialize in things and become the expert in one particular part of the system and take ownership of maybe some new piece of tech or some new pipeline step. But on the other hand, you can't just have all your eggs in one basket, and when that person decides to leave, no one knows how that system works. So that's another thing I struggle with is spreading the knowledge around for how every system works, while also allowing people to specialize and become, owners.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem, I think, in bigger companies, is the documentation part, the preservation part, basically, because so much changes, so much adapting to, all the small tools. I mean, obviously, probably the renderer is hopefully well documented, because it's such an integral part of. But
that's pretty good. It's pretty good.
But the thing is, the small day-to-day tools that like a lighting TD, for example, writes, it's such a hard time because they change a lot of times. There has to be fixes. The project is different, then there has to be change there. And I think that is such a, and obviously like people come, go, and all this flow to keep that in like understandable way is, I think, one of the biggest challenges in such a big company.
Welcome to our short mid-episode coffee break. If you love the content and would like to have a successful career in the film or games industry yourself, check out my website 21artistshow.com. There you can find helpful articles, masterclasses, and coaching opportunities that help dozens of my students to bring their profession to the next level. That's all. Check out 21artistshow.com and share the podcast with cool people you know. Let's continue with the episode.
What I'd be interested also in, it's a little bit like now the interview question basically that you will describe, is like, what was for you personally when you were working as a lighting technical director, what was your hardest challenge that you had so far at Animal Logic, where you felt that was like something where you needed to learn a lot, and that was also like a project where you like,
well, there's a lot.
Every project ended up being like.
Yeah, that's nice when you get a big challenge every time. Like I could say that, early on, before everything was path traced, we did a movie called Legend of the Guardians, which was very ambitious when it came to its like lighting and rendering quality. But we had to do it all with, everything was feathers. It was all owls, really detailed environments. And we wanted, photorealism. We needed indirect lighting and reflections and things like that. But the renderer tech wasn't really there yet. So automating had to bake point clouds and shadow maps and have all that automatically run, that was a big challenge. Because then a few projects later, we started trying to use path tracing for everything, sort of extending RenderMan to path trace, walking with dinosaurs, I think it was. That brought its own challenge. We were like, okay, for this project, we're not going to have any shadow maps or indirect radiance caches. They were like point clouds. That brought its own challenges, memory usage and things like that. One sort of interesting one was on the Peter Rabbit films, which are live action. Most of what you see on the screen is live action plates, and then you have these CG rabbits put into the plates. They weren't huge budget, but there were like 2,000 shots or something with the main characters being these CG rabbits. And how could we automate the sort of lighting in that as best as possible when much of the lighting was coming in the form of light probes, HDRIs from the set. And so that was probably the last big, when I was actually on box doing development work, building the automation for that, so that as light probes came in from the set on these hard drives and, labeled with the slate that they were aligned with, sort of automatically ingesting those into our system, linking them up to the shots that they went with automatically based on the slate numbers, and automatically building light rigs with those light probes on them, having been processed, and then using those in all the review renders so that animation, when they watch their animation, it would automatically composite the animated rabbits onto the plate with shadows coming from the right directions and all the lighting sort of correct. That was a big challenge and very satisfying to get working as well. We sort of perfected it for the sequel. And then we decided to just focus on animated films.
That was the project. That was the project that killed every visual effects and animal logic.
We ever do it again, that's on the shelf, ready to roll.
How would you see, because you at that moment basically had both sides, the visual effects and the animation side, how would you see the different job kind of position for a lighting technical director in a more visual effects heavy environment or film project? And compared to animation, I mean, for lighting artists, it's obviously more freedom, more creativity in a Lego movie compared to
Yeah, especially in a Lego movie. Yeah.
So because it is fictional, everything, you don't have HDRs that you can already use, and there's not fixed plate you have to adjust and stuff like that. How is that different to a lighting technical director in a visual effects environment compared to animation?
I think there's more moving parts on a visual effects film because you've got the plates and where the cameras have to match the plates and the light probes that need to be ingested and tweaked. So you have to build tools to make it easy for the artist to do that. So in a sense, it's sort of simpler in terms of lighting because the lighting was already done on the set, but you have to make it really easy for the lighting artist to first match that, and then secondly, lighting on top of that. So if you just matched the lighting that was there on the plate, it wouldn't look very good. You have to then go and add rim lights and things like that to make the rabbits look nice. So from a TD perspective, it was, I think, mainly an exercise in making sure all these different components were automated well and that the artist didn't have to think about them. So artists shouldn't have to go searching for the light probe that goes with this shot, looking up a big spreadsheet or something like that. It should just be there. So on Peter Rabbit, when they loaded the scene, the plate was already there, the light probe was there, already sort of oriented the right way ideally, and they could just start working. And similarly in the nuke side of things, the comp templates, they would be built automatically with the plate brought in. So basically the principle that anything that can be automated should be automated, and the artist just has to do the artistic
work. Yeah, I think that is also the best description of what the work of a TD is. Everything that has nothing to do with the artistic element, setting the intensity of light, positioning the light, even for that could be even part of that, automating a little bit of that. But of the creative part, that should be taken away. So the artist is literally only sitting down and just focusing on creating the shot, not focusing where to save, how to save, what to import, export, whatever. That is either pipeline TD's job or lighting TD's job. So basically, and then of course, lighting TD is more of summarizing steps, maybe, creating this can you give me a button to give me a setup lights already, or scene setup from the whole sequence or something like that.
Yeah, you've got to talk to the lighting supervisors a lot and identify where there's something that everyone has to do the same thing every shot. They always have to do this, and think about whether you can write a script to do that instead.
How did it change when you moved into, especially like to Lego and completely animation? Like how did like the whole...
Well, we've been like, I've focused on pure animation
at the end of the day, because it's now only one area of focus, basically.
There is that aspect of complexity removed. So you don't have plates, you don't have light probes, you don't have tracking and things to do with matching the camera movement and things like that. But there's more CG stuff in the scene now. It's a bit like, especially on something like Lego, there's matte paintings in the background. There's often big cities. Then there's foreground props and things like that. And then you've got all the characters. And now everything has woven cloth clothes on and hair and things like that. So
it's Pixar's fault. I feel like they're started to have this blend of styles where they still have this very cutesy cartoon style, but the shader becomes so realistic that it basically like everything is like, it looks like cutesy, but the details of everything. I feel, at least
we've been doing like full on, every thread on a thing is a curve in the renderer for the last few films. It's that sort of geometric complexity that is a big challenge usually on animated films. And every time we finish one, we think, well, now we can do it. We can do complex scenes where it's done. And then the next movie that comes along, it doubles, triples the amount of primitives in the scene. So often lately, the challenge has been coming up with ways to reduce the amount of complexity in the scene to the bare minimum you need to get the render out, so that the artists can work with the scenes interactively without having to spend minutes waiting for anything to happen, and for the renders to go on the farm and not run out of memory on the farm.
So what was the big challenge, for example, on the Lego movies, especially on the first one, when you started that one?
It's been a while now, but I think the Lego movie was the first animated film we did that like fully animated, where it was all path traced. All the reflections, all the shadows, all the bounce light was properly, done with rays, as opposed to some other cheat using shadow maps or something like that. The glimpse renderer we have now was developed as a ray server for PRMan. So we'd been using PRMan for years, RenderMan for years, and then we needed more ray tracing in it. And at the time, RenderMan hadn't quite transitioned into being a fully path traced renderer. So it was still a scanline renderer. And we added glimpse in to sort of do all the shadows and the indirect light and the reflections and things like that. So the primary, what you saw was out of PRMan, but all the reflections and things were glimpse. So that was the big challenge on that movie. The sort of creative constraint that sort of drove that was that the whole idea was that the movie should look as if someone had shot it in their basement using real Lego bricks. It had to have that photorealistic feel to it. You couldn't, no bending bricks. The bricks should have fingerprints on them and chips, and all the lighting should. You couldn't cheat the lighting and just say, oh, it's animated, it's stylized. You couldn't use that out. It had to look like it was. Had to be photorealistic enough. Yeah,
I mean, it looks great. Like it's the Lego movies in general have a fantastic shading and lighting. I think like it's especially the smallness. Of it, you still, even though it's like camera is full frame on the characters and stuff like that, you can still feel as you said, like the details of fingerprints or the details of scale.
The look dev department here is very, they always go 110% with the detail and the quality. So that really helps.
To wrap up a little bit, the whole thing is like, what are the things that if you go into an interview for a new technical director for your team, what are the things that, like, first thing, how does this interview look like? What are the things that you usually do? And what are you looking for specifically for a team?
My team is part of production technology. So there's, as I mentioned, some other teams, and it's not uncommon for a few of us supervising TDs to interview the same person at the same time, to have a little panel interview. So we might be considering you for imaging or performance or assets if you just apply as a general sort of TD, and then we'll decide where you best fit. For me personally, we actually have a list of questions that we go through. So I'm interested to know, obviously, Python. Have you done much Python? As I mentioned before, have you just sort of worked with computer graphics, Maya, Houdini, Blender, something like that? User interfaces. Have you done work with like Qt, PyQt, or just built user-facing tools as opposed to just sort of automation? That's a big part of what my team does. We're building basically an app which has lots of little components to it, and making that fast and user-friendly is very important. And then Glimpse uses, our renderer uses standard, rendering techniques. So if you've used Arnold or Redshift or RenderMan, I think Cycles in Blender, if you've worked with those sort of path trace renderers before and understand about rays and bounces and shadows and indirect light, that's what I'm looking for. If you've worked with those and had to debug renders that don't work, that's what I want to hear.
You're like a live test. So here's a scene, open up, so you have 5 minutes to figure out why is there fireflies in the scene?
Yeah, I won't make you do that, but I'll get a sense of whether you...
Is there kind of a test for lighting TD in some ways?
Yeah, there's a standard, we call it a tech task that we send out, it's basically just testing your Python object-oriented Python.
Like what
it's not even graphics related.
What can I imagine as a being like?
We don't want to give you something that's going to take hours, or days to finish. So it's kind of just writing a command line tool that reads some input, reads some files, writes some files. It's a basic programming.
But isn't it can you just skip that if you have a Git repository where you obviously show that you...
Yes, sometimes. I'm not going to guarantee that. But
because that is actually, so I don't know how it is for you. I mean, obviously it depends a little bit on the company. Logic stands higher, so you are more likely to do these things. But sometimes it's just a waste of time if a company asks you to do something so obviously in your skill level that you're literally wasting time to fill that out, and then you still don't know where this is going, the whole process, because it's still in the interviews phase where you don't know. So sometimes I just have this. It's a little bit the same problem.
It's not automatic. We don't give it to everyone.
Okay. But it's a little bit like this, where you have the CV where you have to do that twice or something, where you have to type in your CV in this huge. Yeah. It's such a pain in the ass.
I hope we're not doing that.
but it's such a horrible thing if you'd have to. I understand where it's coming from. It's easier for data tracing.
It's basically, I want to do that when the person has impressed me with their attitude, which is one of the main things is what is their attitude? How are they going to fit into the team? That sort of thing. If they've sort of ticked a lot of the boxes, but I can't be sure that they know how to program. Often people who are coming, maybe they're artists who want to move into the TD role. So it's mainly when I'm not sure about your programming skills. It's even though it's quite a simple test, it's interesting the variety of ways people deal with it and what you can find.
What is the most important skill sets that you are looking for in a lighting TD, just to kind of get a wrap around?
Just understanding the computer graphics, CG animation production process, understanding what lighting is, having an appreciation for that as an art form, I think, and Python programming.
What kind of level would you expect on
Python?
Is it classes? You have to have no decorators. You have to know.
You don't have to be super advanced, but intermediate, I guess. Yeah, you have to understand what classes are, object-oriented programming, because that's everywhere in the code that we use.
But you don't not generators or something like that?
You have to at least be at the level where if you saw a generator, you could figure out what's happening.
Next, basically.
Yeah, that is in our code. That sort of stuff is in our code. So
that is also something I had from Weta, a question about generators, and I actually didn't know I generally know what it is, but I never barely used it. And then I noticed it was part of their actual code. And so it was good for me to know about it. So the question was not just hypothetical, do you know generators? Which was actually something that I ended up.
Yeah, people use it, so you're gonna see it and not understand what it is.
Yeah, that would be not. Yeah, even though you shouldn't be like, you don't have to be an expert in generation. Like, you don't have to be like, oh, this is a perfect time for a generator.
You don't have to be a super Python whiz, but it's what you're gonna. It's the main thing you're gonna be working on is Python. So I don't like to be. I don't have favorite computer languages, but it is. That is the reality of our industry. Is that's the glue language that everything is glued together with. So that. Having worked with renderers really helps. It's rare, but if you've worked with USD, that's a super bonus for us.
And if not, you can just get a little bit of a,
If you haven't, you can go and read up on it before the.
But you would not expect like someone like come in USD, like you already work with it. That's a requirement.
It's not a hard requirement.
Okay,
no,
but
otherwise I wouldn't
obviously
be able to hire
they should
anyone.
know what USD is, and
yeah, it's good if you know what it is. I always ask.
The standards are lower here. Like he's like, just like, please have read about it at least.
Well, I know so. Everyone on my team had to learn it on the job here, so it'd be a bit unfair to say you have to already know it.
I think it's probably in the job application. Probably
it'll be mentioned there, but probably as a bonus. Yeah, I always keep forgetting to mention it, but people skills, right? So. If you've worked on a group project, if you're a student, but if you've worked somewhere else in a different industry, but you've worked on a team, I'll ask you a lot about how you manage your time, who your clients were, what your relationship with them was, and how you planned what you were going to do, like who contributed to that planning and how you thought about that, because that tells me a lot about environments you've had to work in and whether you would fit in to this sort of environment, which involves a lot of having to deal with people in different disciplines and collaborate. And collaboration is very important, being able to do that. Some of the best guys on my team are just really good at going and knowing when to go and talk to someone and knowing what level to dig too deep to understand a problem.
I think that's kind of a general TD like qualification to be some kind of communicative. Don't have to be like, the most, sales guy and stuff like that, but you cannot be, I don't think you can be an introvert, like a pure like introvert,
it's somewhere in between.
Don't talk to me kind of.
You don't have to be like flamboyant, extroverted person, but you're not going to be able to just sit there, get your project and work on it and push code out. And that's all you have to do. You'll need to collaborate with other people outside the team and get to know them and understand their needs, that sort of thing, and communicate your needs to them as well.
Awesome. Any final advice, ideas, especially if they want to apply maybe to Animal, that you would say that people can like touch upon? Maybe something current besides USD that you feel like people can look into as for this kind of roles? One
advice I used to give way back, because one of the reasons I got this job in the first place was I did this animated project I mentioned at university. And I was one of the only people in my class to actually finish it and at the end have something that was like everything was complete. It was rendered, animated, lit, edited. I haven't been great at it since then, but one thing you should try to do is at least have some projects where you've set the scope small enough that you can actually achieve it. And that's a mistake that a lot of people make, is that like, I'm going to make my own movie, or I'm going to make this really complicated short film. But if you're going to start working soon, you're not going to have much time to do that. So it's worth trying to find something bite-sized that you can actually do, finish and be proud of, and just strip out all the stuff that doesn't interest you so much. Design a project that focuses on the thing that you want to get good at. Listen, that might be writing an app, it might be making an animation.
How much do you see a problem of people showing very abstract, boring, non-project scenes instead of maybe extra taking the time to have something that you feel like, like a cube moved around or cube being lit or whatever, instead of like having something that at least looks like a project, even if it's obviously not one.
It certainly helps to have something that you can show in 20 seconds and someone gets a sense of what it can do and what the effort you've put into it. Yeah. In practice though, it's very rare for people to show off their app programming that they've done, other than just sending us a GitHub link.
Oh yeah? So they rarely show some kind of video?
Show reels, no.
I mean,
maybe we don't ask them to, maybe we should.
I mean, usually, like I say, if you have a GitHub, you should have a wiki in there. And the wiki should have GIFs and images and hopefully video.
It helps me a lot if I can go to your GitHub and then just scroll and I see pictures and I'm like, oh, I see what it is.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? Definitely.
It's a different level than I was used to. I think I'm coming more from media computer science. Maybe that's...
Yeah, that's... if I have to click into code and source something.py and start reading it, it's hard to get a feeling for what it is.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So screenshots, little videos, that helps.
Okay.
I feel weird asking for that because generally we don't get that, but that would be a step up.
No one, you would not expect from a lighting technical director to have a show reel.
No, and often it's if they're coming from other companies, usually they're not going to have videos of proprietary software they've written it. So
obviously.
That's usually you can only get a show reel from stuff that's been released into the public.
Yeah.
That's probably one aspect of it.
Okay. I was wondering, what is this board game actually? Have you tried it?
I think
we're commercializing it here, and no one knows what's like.
We had our 30-year anniversary, and I think this was part of the celebrations, like a couple of years ago.
Animal Logic, the ultimate board game, and it looks like a familiar board game, but I don't know the name in English.
They made apparently almost 1,000 of them, and we all got one.
But it's not for sale.
We can ask afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
They seem to have some space.
Maybe, guys. Steve, thank you very much. It was such a pleasure to have you, and
thanks for having me.
Answer a little bit the question of what is a lighting technical and render technical director, and also how to apply for it. I think that is always, besides understanding the role, is like how to get in the role. And again, I think a lot of people focus on the wrong things. A lot of times, they want to make a show reel, even though like a GitHub would be probably more important. They want to do too much of this, software is important. I have to become an expert in Maya in every way. And it's like, no one cares as much as long as you can.
Not in my team, but
yeah, but I mean, also generally speaking, like I feel like at the end of the day, you have to be flexible enough to
learn new things. Yeah,
to learn new things. That's why the question I had before, where is it important to have like one person like Maya, Arnold, that's it? Is that because feels like very much too focused and maybe not flexible enough in possible quotations?
It is nice to see that you've tried a few different things. You're not hung up on one particular piece of technology. Yeah, it's nice to see that. But it's not a deal killer. If all you've done is Maya and Arnold, that could be enough.
Hopefully everyone understands the lighting TD role better, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's it with this week's episode of the 21 Artist Show. Thank you so much for watching and listening. This podcast is 100% ad-free, and to keep it that way, check out my website 21artistshow.com. There you can find exclusive access to awesome masterclasses and coaching opportunities to work successfully in visual effects, animation, and games. Just go to 21artistshow.com. And don't forget to share it with people who would benefit from that content and tell them they're awesome. See you on the next episode.